Good evening, dear Insomniac. Come in, and come sit close tonight, if you would. Not for the cold, just because this one's a little nearer to me than most, and I'd rather tell it to someone close by than call it across the room. There's a page in the guest log I want to tell you about. For years, it held a single name, written small up in the corner. The way a person writes when they're not sure they're allowed to take up the space. The same name. Visit after visit, always alone, always small, always in the corner of the page. And then, quite recently, that page gained 4 more names in one night. 4 different hands. One of them so large it barely fit. And I believe the gentleman was genuinely embarrassed about it, though there was no need. The log has survived worse. The young man those 4 came in with had been my guest many times a long while ago. And that night, sitting by this fire with his companions around him, he told them the whole of his story, where he'd come from, and what the road had been to him before they found him on it. I sat and listened along with the rest, and afterward, I asked if I might write it down, because some stories ought to be kept somewhere safe, and keeping things safe is rather the business of this place. I'll warn you, gently, it starts in a cold place. He'd want me to tell it true, and so I will. But you're by the fire, and the door is shut, and the cold in this story stays in the story. It's called Stepping into the Sunlight, and every word of it ends up exactly where a story ought to. Settle in then, in his words, as near as I could keep them. There was once a boy named Finn, who learned very young that he was not wanted. Nobody sat him down to tell him so. It arrived in pieces, the way the worst news usually does. It was in the way his portions got smaller when the harvests did. It was in the way his name came last, when it came at all. His family was large, and their land was poor, and somewhere along the way it had been quietly decided, never aloud, never kindly, never to him, that Finn was the mouth they could least justify feeding. He was clumsy where his brothers were strong, slow where they were quick, and forever caught reading when there was work to be done. Useless was the word. He heard it often enough that he stopped hearing it, the way you stop hearing a clock. The year he turned 15, after a bad harvest and a worse winter, his father put a sack in his hands with 3 days' bread in it, and told him the town would suit him better than the farm. The town did not suit him better than the farm. He was known there, that was the trouble. Known as his family's spare boy, the useless one, and no door in his own hometown would open all the way for him. Some opened a crack, long enough to say they were sorry and weren't hiring. And had he tried the next town over? So he tried the next town over. And the one after that. And the one after that. And by then the bread was long gone, and Finn had begun his education in the particular arithmetic of having nothing. How far a day's walk stretches on an empty stomach, which barns lock and which don't. How much colder the hour before dawn is than any other hour of the night. He found work here and there. It was never good work. When you have nothing, and everyone can see you have nothing, a certain kind of person finds you. The kind with a smile that doesn't reach all the way up, and a job that somebody desperate might take. Finn hauled and dug and carried for men who counted his wages wrong, and dared him, with a look, to say so. He slept in a stable one whole winter in exchange for work that would have been 3 men's work in any fair place. And once, for a crew he should never have said yes to, in a ruin they had no honest business entering, he learned what he was actually there for, which was to be the one sent in first, the one who finds out whether the floor holds, the one nobody comes back for, the floor held that time. Finn walked away from that crew the same night and told nobody, because there was nobody to tell. That was the part of the telling, Finn said, years later, by a fire to the people who loved him. That was hardest to explain. Not the hunger, and not the cold. The nobody. You can get used to an empty stomach. It's loud, but it's simple. What he never got used to was the slow understanding that if he vanished from the road one night, the world would close over the place he'd been like water over a stone, and not one person in it would ever ask where Finn had gone. He was 17, and thin, and running out of towns, the night everything changed. Although it did not look like the night everything changed, it looked like rain. It came on fast, out on the empty stretch between two towns, the cold kind of rain that means business, and Finn was caught in the open with dark coming down and nothing on the road but meadow. He was past hoping for shelter and simply looking for a hedge thick enough to crawl under. And that is when he saw the lamps. A building stood in the meadow. He'd walked this road before, more than once, and he could have sworn on anything that no building stood in this meadow. But there it was, all the same. Tall windows, full of warm light, and a door. And the door was open, not unlocked. Open, standing open to the rain and the dark, as if it were waiting on someone. Every instinct Finn owned told him what open doors cost. He'd paid before. He stood in the rain a long moment, doing the sums of the desperate, and the rain won, as it was always going to, and he crossed the meadow and stopped on the threshold of the strangest and warmest room he had ever seen, dripping, holding his empty hands a little out from his sides, the way you do when you want it understood right away that you've got nothing worth robbing you for. The keeper of the place looked up from the desk. Finn began his speech. He had a speech, worn smooth from use. Sorry to trouble you, only the weather. Happy to work for it. I can haul, dig, carry, anything. And he got perhaps 6 words into it. You're wet through, said the keeper, as though this were the only fact in the room worth discussing. The fire's just there. Go and stand by it before you make yourself ill. Finn did not move. There'd been no question yet, was the thing. There was always a question. Who are you? What do you want? What have you got? And everything after the question depended on the answer. And Finn's answers were nobody, shelter, nothing. He stood on the mat, dripping, waiting for it. It never came. What came instead was the keeper, past him, to shut the door against the wind, and then a chair drawn nearer the fire with a small scrape, and then, a few minutes later, tea. Just tea. Set down beside him on a little table without ceremony, the way you'd set it down for someone who was expected. I can work for it, Finn said. It came out rougher than he meant it to. For tea, said the keeper, with a mild sort of surprise, as though he'd offered to pay for the rain. It's already made. Somebody may as well drink it while it's hot. And that was the whole of the interrogation. That was everything the library ever demanded of Finn, as the price of coming in from the dark, that he'd drink the tea while it was hot. He sat rigid in that chair for the better part of an hour, waiting for the cost of all this to introduce itself. He watched the keeper move about the place, tending the fire, straightening a shelf, writing something in a great worn book on the desk. and he catalogued the exits and kept his boots on and did not let himself lean back. But the fire was very warm, and the rain on the roof was very steady, and the room smelled of paper and wood smoke, and somewhere in that hour 17 years of being braced came up against the simple animal fact of being warm and dry and let alone and lost. Finn fell asleep sitting up, mid-vigilance, like a candle going out. He woke near dawn, mortified, already apologizing. There was a blanket over him that had not been there before. The keeper was at the desk, and merely observed that the rain had passed, and that if he was walking on, the road east was firmer than it looked. And Finn stepped out the door into the grey first light, alone, and glanced back once from the middle of the meadow. And there was nothing behind him at all. Only wet grass, going on forever, and a river, and the ordinary morning. He stood there a long while. Then he walked on, because walking on was the one thing he knew how to do. But here is what Finn carried away from that meadow and turned over and could not put down. She never asked. Not his name, not his business, not what he had. And he'd had nothing, and she must have seen it the moment he came through the door, the way everyone always saw it. And the tea had come anyway. In 17 years, Finn could not remember one single thing that had come anyway. He was back within a fortnight. He told himself it was to test whether he'd dreamed it. The lamps were lit, the door was open. The tea, impossibly, was already made. I'd a feeling someone was on the road tonight, was all the explanation that ever came. And this time, Finn stayed awake. And this time, he noticed the books. He'd always loved them, back before loving them was held against him. And rising along every wall of this impossible place were more books than Finn had known existed. And among them, when he began shyly to look, whole shelves of the exact knowledge he had spent 2 years being punished for lacking. Knots, maps, weather, the management of loads and the crossing of rivers and the care of gear. Everything the road had been beating into him the hard way, written down patiently by people who'd wanted the next traveller to have it easier. Something lit in Finn that night that all the cold years had not managed to put out. He could not make the world want him. He'd long since given up on that. But perhaps, he could make himself useful to it, learn enough, know enough, and surely somewhere, someday, some crew or caravan or party would look past the thinness and the patched coat and see something worth taking along. So began the years of the corner table. Whenever the roads brought him near, and he arranged his wandering, more and more so that they did. Finn came at dusk across the meadow, and the lamps were always lit, and the door was always open, and the keeper would nod him in, as though his coming were the most natural thing in the world. He took the table half hidden behind the tall case, where he could work unwatched, and he read and copied and memorized until the small hours, and the tea was always filled before he noticed it was empty. And no one, ever, not once, asked him what he thought he was doing there or when he intended to leave. He tried to pay. That must be said, because Finn insisted on saying it. The little money that reached his hands in those years, and little it was. He tried, more than once, to press on the keeper. Out of a gratitude he had no other way to spend. It was refused. Not coldly. It was refused the way you'd refuse payment from family, with a kind of puzzlement, that the question had come up at all. The books like being read. You're doing them a favor, if anything. Once, stubborn, he left 3 small coins on the desk anyway, and hurried out before he could be stopped, feeling very clever. They were never mentioned, but he noticed, the next visit, that his tea came in the good cup after that, the blue one with the gold ring, the one from the high shelf, and every visit after, always, without a word. It took him an embarrassingly long time to understand he was being out-stubborned. And slowly, so slowly, he never caught it happening. The library did something to Finn that no roof had ever done. It became the place he was walking toward. All over that country, on cold roads at the far ends of hard days, there was now a door in a meadow that would be open, and a fire that would be lit, and a corner that was— He hardly dared use the word, even inside his own head, his. He was still poor, and still alone, and still nobody's. But he was expected somewhere. He'd never once in his life been expected somewhere. Some nights he didn't study at all. Some nights he just sat, in the quiet, near the fire, near the sound of another person turning pages, and let himself be a boy in a warm room. He never told the keeper what those nights meant. He assumed it wasn't noticed. It was noticed. The years went on that way, the road by day, the lamps at dusk, Finn growing older and steadier and quietly full of learning, and still, at every town, the same shrugs. Crews wanted experience, parties wanted references. Nobody wanted a book-taught nobody, however bright his eyes when he talked about weather signs. He'd walk back out to the meadow at each rejection and take it to the corner table like a wound to a healer and study harder. And then one day, he didn't come back. There was no drama in it, though it shames him now how it must have looked. It was only distance and desperation. Word of work, real work, 2 valleys over, then further still, each step taking him farther from the one door that had ever stood open for him. He thought about the library constantly. He told himself he'd get back when he could. But the roads that had once looped kindly past that meadow now ran all wrong, and the seasons stacked up, and a year became 2. And Finn was a long, long way from the lamps, still knocking on the world's doors, still hearing no. He was 20, and mending a stranger's crooked waymarker in the rain. For no wage, for no reason, only because somebody was going to get lost, and he had paint in his pack and knew, from a book, from a lamplit corner table 2 years behind him, exactly how the thing should be done. When a voice at his back said, "You always do things like that," 4 travellers stood under the dripping trees. A grey-streaked woman with a face like a well-used map. A sharp-eyed young man in a scout's oilskin. A round, comfortable woman with a healer's satchel. And a man the size of a modest barn holding a canvas sheet over the other 3 as if it weighed nothing at all. Finn made his speech. The speech was old and smooth by now. Capable, hard-working, book-learned, give me one chance. The grey-streaked woman, Marla, listened to about half of it, watching him with an expression he couldn't read, and then looked past him at the mended signpost, straight and braced and freshly lettered, doing its quiet job in the rain for people who would never know who to thank. "That'll do better than the speech," she said. "We're the waymenders. We're short a pair of hands. Walk with us a while." Finn had heard versions of Walk With Us a While before, and knew the trapdoors under it. So for the first weeks he walked braced, worked twice as hard as anyone, ate less than his share, slept apart from the fire, waited for the smile that didn't reach all the way up. Here is what happened instead. Dove, the barn-sized one, who was gentle with everything smaller than himself, which was everything, took one look at Finn's textbook-perfect rucksack, repacked it in 90 seconds, adjusted 2 straps, and gave it back, transformed. "Book's not wrong," he said, "but a pack should hug you, not ride you." It was the first time in Finn's life a strong man had put hands on his gear to make his load lighter. Etta, the healer, noticed him eating short and served him twice as much without comment, every meal, until eating properly stopped feeling like theft. She caught him white-knuckled at a rope crossing one grey morning, sat beside him without any fuss, and said, "Fear's not the enemy, love. Fear's information. It's telling you to check the rope twice. So check it twice. Then go." Nobody had ever called Finn's fear anything but weakness. He checked it twice. Then he went. Sen, the scout, argued with him. Really argued, wanting to hear Finn's actual thoughts on routes and weather, taking them seriously enough to fight them. And half the time ended by saying, "Huh, where'd you learn that?" And Finn would say, "A library you wouldn't believe." And Sen would say the river had probably moved since the book was written. Rivers do. But he'd take the advice. And Marla taught him pace. The Waymenders moved at the speed of their slowest member, always, as plain policy, and nobody was ever left standing in anyone's dust. "Fast is for people going nowhere in particular," she said. "We're going somewhere. That's different." The night it all finally cracked open was an ordinary night, a fire on the high moor, some months in. Marla reached over, took Finn's tin cup, and hung it on the crossbar over the fire, where the party's cups hung, one hook each, a thing Finn had noticed his first night, and never once presumed to touch. "Trial's over," she said. "Been over a while. We forgot to mention it." "Family doesn't audition," said Etta to the fire, as if remarking on the weather. And Finn looked at his cup, hanging 5th of 5, and had to leave the fire for a little while, and nobody followed him, and nobody mentioned it when he came back. And that, the not mentioning, was its own kind of gentleness, and he knew it. All his stored-up learning came pouring out of him after that, the way water comes when the frost finally lets a pump go. Guided by patient hands, the theory found its uses. His knots landed true, his fires caught, and one milk-white night, when the fog ate the moor-path whole, and even Sen turned a circle and swore. It was Finn who said quietly, "Wind's still southerly, and the ground's been falling left. Keep the wind on that cheek and the slope on that one, and we cut the drover's road inside a mile." They did. It rose up out of the white to meet them, exactly as a lamplit page had promised him years before. Dove's hand landed on his shoulder like a roof beam settling, and no one made a speech, and none was needed. And so it was that some while later, on an evening walk between 2 towns, Finn asked his family for a favour. There was somewhere he wanted them to see, he said, somewhere that had kept him alive through everything he'd never yet told them. The only catch was the timing. It had to be dusk. They came along the old road as the light went amber, then rose, then grey-blue, Finn watching the empty meadows so intently that his family began trading glances over his head, which, in Dove's case, was not difficult. And as the first star came out, the lamps came with it. The library stood in the meadow, tall windows full of warm light, and the door, The door was open. The keeper looked up as 5 sets of boots came over the threshold, and if a person can smile with an entire room, the library did. "There you are," she said. 3 years, and that was the whole of the reckoning. There you are. "I've just made tea. Somebody may as well drink it while it's hot." And there, that night, by that fire, with the good blue cup, with the gold rings set down at his place without a word, as if no time had passed at all, Finn told them everything. All of it, whole, in order, for the first time in his life. The farm, and the sack with 3 days' bread in it, the towns and the doors opened a crack, the winters and the barns and the wages counted wrong. He kept his voice steady through most of it, in the careful, practiced way of someone who has carried a thing so long he's learned how to lift it without showing the weight. His family did not stay steady. Etta was the first to go, and she went early, at the sack of bread, at 15. And she didn't trouble to hide it or wipe at it, just let the tears come, while she watched him, nodding him on, the way a healer holds still for something that has to be gotten out, when he reached the crew that sent him in first, the floor, and the nobody who'd have come back for him. Finn heard a sound from across the fire, and looked up to find that Dov, the size of a barn, the strength of the whole party, had simply put his face in his hands. He stayed that way a long moment, that enormous frame shaking gently and silently, and when he finally lifted his head and reached for the handkerchief, he didn't manage to say anything at all. He just looked at Finn as though someone had told him, years too late, about a load he would have carried gladly. Sen fought it the longest, because Sen would. He sat sharp-eyed and jaw-tight through the cold years, blinking hard, deploying every scout's trick for a man determined not to be seen. And then Finn got to the rain, and the lamps in the meadow, and the tea that came anyway, and said quietly, "In 17 years I could not remember one single thing that had come anyway." And Sen made a small defeated noise and gave it up entirely, and cried like the young man he actually was, and Etta reached over and held his hand without either of them looking at each other. And Marla sat like stone, all the way through, watching Finn with that unreadable, well-used map face, arms folded, firelight moving on her, and nothing else. Anyone who didn't know her might have thought it wasn't reaching her at all. Finn told them about the corner table and the years of it, about the coins that were never mentioned and the good cup that appeared, about what it was to be expected somewhere, when he had never once in his life been expected anywhere. He looked at the keeper when he said that part, and the keeper looked at the fire, and was, for once, no help at all. And then he turned to the 4 of them. He told them what the cup on the crossbar had done to him, that he'd walked braced beside them for weeks, waiting for the smile that didn't reach all the way up, because that was the only kind he'd ever been given, and it never came. And the not coming had undone him more gently and more completely than any hardship ever had. That he'd spent years at that corner table studying how to be useful enough to be kept, building himself into something worth taking along. And they'd gone and kept him before he'd proven a single thing. That he still didn't fully understand it, that he'd stopped needing to. "I was going to earn my way into a family," he said. "I had it all planned, and then you lot just..." His voice, which had held through starvation and cold and every closed door in the country, chose that moment to stop working. He looked down at his hands. He tried again. You just handed me one, like it was nothing, like I was... He couldn't finish it, so Dov finished it for him, in a voice like a rock slide trying to be careful. Like you were ours. And that was the end of anyone's composure, anywhere in the room. Etta was up and across and had her arms around Finn before he'd even properly begun to cry, and she held on to him the way she'd once held that bandaged bridge together, murmuring, I know, love, I know, let it come. While years of it came. Sen abandoned the chimney excuse altogether, scrubbed his sleeve across his face, and said wetly and fiercely, You realize we tell people about you. Everywhere we go, our Finn read it in a book, we say. We're insufferable about you. You're the best thing this party ever found on a road, and I include the beekeeper. And then his voice went too, and Dov gathered him in with one arm, without seeming to think about it, the way you'd shelter something from weather. And Marla stood up. She crossed to Finn slowly and crouched down in front of him, where Etta still held him, and took his face in her two weathered hands. And she was crying, Marla. Openly, and making no apology for it, the tears just moving down that map of a face like rain finding old riverbeds. Now you listen to me, she said, and her voice broke on the second word, and she carried on anyway, because Marla finished what she started. You've got it wrong way round. You think we took a chance on you. Boy, you were mending a stranger's signpost in the rain, for no one, for nothing. I've walked these roads 40 years, and I've met every kind of clever and every kind of strong, and none of it's worth a bent nail next to what you were doing in that mud. Her thumbs moved, once, roughly, along his cheekbones. Every door that shut on you was a fool behind it, every single one. But I'll tell you a shameful secret. She pulled him forward until their foreheads touched, and the fire cracked, and the whole room held still. I'm glad they were fools. God forgive me. Because their fool doors are how you ended up at mine. For a long while, after that, nobody moved, and the fire did all the talking. 5 people folded in close, around one chair, the keeper's tea going cold for once, in that library's long history, and no one minding, least of all the keeper, who had quietly given up some time ago on the fiction that her own eyes were dry. It was Etta at last, because hearts can only stand so much, and healers know the dosage, who pulled back, blew her nose in a business-like fashion, and announced that if somebody didn't tell a cheerful story, immediately she couldn't answer for the consequences. And so, the night turned, the way the best nights do, grief and gratitude banking down into something warm enough to cook on. They told the keeper everything, the beekeeper and her 2 valleys of furious cargo, the goat that outsmarted them for 3 days, the bell they'd rehung upside down on the first try, Sen insisting the bell had been hung wrong to begin with, and no one believing him, then or now. The keeper laughed until she had to set her cup down, and gave them stories back, and the fire was fed, and the rain came and went on the roof, and Finn sat in the middle of it all, with Etta's shoulder against his, and Dov's arm along the back of his chair. Being simply in his family, the way you can only be in something you no longer fear losing. And none of them noticed the windows going from black to grey to a soft, promising gold. It was the keeper, at last, who rose and said, with something in her voice, that the library kept short hours, and that morning was nearly at the door. They gathered their packs. They signed the log, all 5, on the page that had held one small lonely name for years, 4 new names in 4 hands, one so large it barely fit. And at the threshold, Finn stopped and turned and tried to say some part of what could not be said. "Come back whenever the road allows," said the keeper, before he could begin. "The door will be open. It always was, you know. It was never only the rain." And Finn stepped out through that door. At that same pale hour, he had stepped through it 100 times before. 100 grey mornings, 100 empty meadows. Alone, alone, alone. The morning was clear and gold, coming up over the wet grass. And behind him, Dove, ducking under the lintel, Etta, complaining amiably about her knees, Sen, already proposing a route, Marla, already ignoring it, 4 people stepping out into the sunlight after him, with him, his family, shouldering their packs in the early gold, squinting happily into a day that belonged to all of them together. Finn looked back once, from the middle of the meadow. The library was already going, thinning into the brightness the way it always did, lamps first, then walls, then the warm dark doorway, until there was only grass, and the river, and the morning. But it was not the going of something lost. It was the going of something that would be back at dusk, with its lamps lit and its door open. He knew that now, the way he knew his own name. "Well," said Marla, settling her pack, "where to?" And Finn, who had waited his whole life for somebody to ask him that, stood in the sunlight, in the middle of his family, and smiled, and turned down the road to find out. There, told true, cold beginning and all, and ended exactly where I promised you it would. I'd like to tell you I kept my composure through all of that, being the keeper of the place and meant to be past surprising. I did not. Some nights the room does the holding, and some nights the room needs a moment too, and I've decided I'm quite at peace with which kind of night that was. I'll tell you one small thing more, since it's late, and you've listened so kindly. There are 3 coins in the drawer of that desk that I never asked for and never spent. I couldn't tell you exactly why I've kept them, except that nothing in this library gets crossed out, and some things, once given, are worth more staying exactly where they are. If the world has been a cold road to you, if you know something about doors opened a crack and about carrying on anyway, then let tonight be your meadow, and this your open door. You don't have to earn the fire, you never did. The tea was already made, somebody may as well rest while it's warm. Sleep now, dear Insomniac. Morning is out there getting itself ready, gold and patient, and when you're ready, and not one moment before, you'll step into it, and who knows who'll be stepping into it beside you. Good night.